It's kind of unbelievable.
It is quite nice here today. It's always this warm in spring, right?
That's nicer here, huh?
That is not
Where's
the
Al?
message. That's not the message.
That'll be here in a little bit. He's at another.
Can't believe you gave him a
He's at an
day off.
economic meeting right now because we're trying to bring more things to Fargo. You know how
What
that
does he
goes.
know about economics?
Valley Prosperity. Valley Prosperity is he meeting with. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. We especially are pleased to have the FEMA representatives here. And I think we're going to let Senator Hoven kick this one off, are we?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Appreciate it very much. Thank you for joining us and helping us set up this meeting. And also, Congressman Kramer, I want to thank you for joining us as well. We have Roy Wright here, who's the administrator for mitigation for FEMA. And the whole purpose of the meeting is to make sure that we are coordinating between the permanent flood protection that Fargo and Cass County, Moorhead, Clay County, and the region, but the permanent flood protection that the region is putting in place. We want to make sure that that effort, and there's so many aspects to that, we want to make sure that that dovetails as seamlessly as possible with the flood mapping and with our hazard mitigation funding and with flood insurance so that we both minimize the number of people that actually have to buy flood insurance as the permanent flood protection is put in place, and for those that do have to buy flood insurance both during and even possibly afterwards, that we minimize the cost of that flood insurance. So it's really to make sure that we're coordinating between hazard mitigation and flood insurance and the flood protection that's being built for the whole region. And that can get complicated, and it takes an ongoing planning, coordinating process. And so I had met with Craig Fugate, the director of FEMA. Now, I'm on appropriations, and the committee that I chair is Department of Homeland Security. And so it's about a $40 billion budget, but one of the budgets we have is FEMA, and we appropriate for FEMA. So I sat down earlier this year with Administrator Fugate, and I said, you know, Fargo is doing a tremendous amount, the whole region, Red River Valley, North Dakota, Minnesota together, to build permanent flood protection. And, you know, we see it as a four-part plan. It's first regional in scope, making sure that you've got the dams, dikes, levees, buyouts, all these things to make sure that it's not just Fargo, Moorhead, but the region. You've got the diversion, the permanent project. We've got the upstream issues, storage, addressing upstream concerns and flooding. And then we've got the flood insurance piece. And we have to make sure all those things are working together simultaneously because it's large, it's complicated, and there's a lot of moving parts. And so you've got your diversion authority that's doing a good job of planning for not only the communities but the counties in both states. We now need to make sure that FEMA's working right along with us on flood insurance and hazard mitigation. So my question to Fugate was, who's the guy? I don't want a committee, you know. I don't want like 6 people. I want a guy or woman, man or woman, who is responsible to work with us to make sure that the hazard mitigation and the flood insurance is coordinated with this comprehensive permanent flood protection effort, and who's going to work with us on an ongoing basis. And he said 2 words to me, Roy Wright, him. So, and I obviously belabor that a little bit, but for a reason. You are a partner. These guys collectively are doing an awful lot of work in an awful lot of areas to bring people together and get permanent flood protection in this 2-state region that we so badly need. But it affects everybody as we build it. And it affects them, you know, with the basement exemption, with the flood mapping, with the timing of the flood mapping. And of course, as they build all these different aspects of the permanent protection, it will very much affect who has to buy flood insurance, what the cost is both during construction for that flood insurance, and then, you know, what it's going to cost for anyone that has to continue to have it afterwards. So we need you as an ongoing, a day-to-day partner that we can work with, state and local, to make sure that this stuff fits together. I've talked to many home builders and developers and homeowners and insurance people who say, you know, they've got different challenges with making all of this work. And so we need you on an ongoing basis to be our partner in making sure that this works as well as possible. So with that, I'm going to turn to...
Could I just do one thing here, Representative
Yeah,
Kramer?
please,
I
yes.
apologize for this, but the public doesn't know everybody at the
Please,
table,
sure.
Senator, so maybe we
Yeah.
could just go around the table so people would
By all
understand
means,
who's
let's,
here.
let's
We know
start
they've
out-
traveled a distance, so.
Sure, and then we'll turn to... But Roy, why don't you start, and then we'll run right around the table.
Roy Wright, I'm the Deputy Associate Administrator for Mitigation, so I am the Senior Career Executive over all of the programs that Chairman Hoveman just referenced.
I'm Ryan Petramale with FEMA. I'm the Risk Analysis Branch Chief out of FEMA Region 8 in Denver.
Aaron Davis with FEMA Congressional Affairs.
Good afternoon, Greg Wills, Department of Emergency Services.
I'm Matt Cowles. I'm with the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security, which Senator Hogan chairs, and I have responsibility for the FEMA account within that budget.
I'm John Puskowski. I'm with the State Water Commission. I'm the chief of the regulatory section there.
Good afternoon. Renee Arfer, Southeast Area Director for Senator Heitkamp, who was unable to attend.
I'm Clay Dietrich. I am the president of the Home Builders Association of Fargo Moorhead and a local builder of single-family and multifamily housing.
Good afternoon, Jason Benson, the Cass County Engineer.
Good afternoon. I'm Keith Burnt, the Cass County Administrator.
Hello, Chad Peterson, Chairman of the Cass County Commission.
April Walker, City of Fargo Engineering Department.
And Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo.
Okay.
And I'm Kevin Kramer from Kindred.
Suburb.
Well,
Yeah.
with that, let's turn to Kevin Kramer from Kindred.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here, Mr. Administrator and Chief. Thank you, all of you, for being here. And Senator Hoeven, of course, has teed it up perfectly, as he always does, and laid it all out. And some of the things in my short time in Congress that we've worked on together to sort of bridge the gap, if you will, things like the Flood Insurance Affordability Act and trying to sort of fix some of the challenges that you all had to deal with when a rather abrupt law was put into place, are fine. But this really is the opportunity to talk long-term, to provide that certainty to home builders and developers in the city and everybody else. And so we're greatly appreciative of your time here. One of the things I think you'll see here, if you haven't already noticed, and you'll certainly hear us talk a lot about, is that you're in a place where, while it's a beautiful sunny April day, a place that knows the hazards, obviously, of flooding, and who responds like no other place. And when I say that, I mean not just in the face of disaster, but in trying to mitigate and invest in themselves in major ways to help, keep their city safe. And that includes not just financial resources, but human capital as well. There's nothing like it, really, that I've ever seen. That's not to say there aren't a lot of other good places in the country that step up in big ways as well. But Fargo and this region, this community, and frankly this state have done a lot to help themselves, and so we're grateful for whatever role. Obviously, you're the partner, as John said. You're the partner. We can't do it without you. So I think you'll see that firsthand today. And thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, and I see Commissioner Vanios here and Mayor Nyhoff. Do you guys want to join us, or are you planning to sneak out early? Is that why we got you in the back there? Or why don't you guys come on up? And
There's lots of chairs and
Yeah,
microphones.
We got chairs. And why don't you guys come up, because I want to make sure we include you. Mayor, I'll swing over to you, unless you want to go to Roy. You tell me. Would you like to throw a few thoughts in on the front end here?
I could let Roy speak first. We have a presentation for you, so I could, if you'd like to make some opening remarks, that'd be fine, and then I'd be happy to start to launch our presentation.
Okay.
Very simply, thank you for the invitation. It is a pleasure to be here. And I love the term you're using related to partner, because I travel across the country, and I'm in many states and communities. What is very true here is your guys' attention to understanding risk and what does it mean about mitigating and doing something about it. And we'll talk about some of the mechanics about it, and there are pieces related to the programs that we probably need to continue to be adaptive and find ways to help you down those roads to those ends. But it is truly a pleasure to be able to come into communities like this where there is such an attention to this, the investments and attention that the state, the city, and the counties are made. I don't see most of the time, and so I'm happy to be here. I look forward to learning from you all and engaging in the dialogue throughout the afternoon.
I think that's true. I mean, when you look at, Fargo, Moorhead, Cass, Clay, rural areas, I'm not sure there are too many places that have brought as many people together working on a comprehensive flood effort as this region. It's remarkable. And also, as you become more educated on the P3 project they've put together, it's going to blow you away, period.
Absolutely.
It's the best I've ever seen. It's some of the most creative thinking I've ever seen in government. And that's an understatement. But Darrell, you are mayor now. If anything you want to lob in before we let the city run with the presentation?
Just a short comment. Thank you, Senator. I'm just most appreciative of the fact that we have you folks here to see and hear firsthand our issues. And I, as the chair of the Diversion Authority board, certainly the senators alluded to the fact that we have a lot of things going in terms of flood protection and the FEMA situation and insurance and all that. And this kind of gives you that firsthand glimpse and overview of all of that. So I'm happy you're here.
Thank you, Senator. I too echo what Darrell just said. There is a lot going on, and from as far south as our community and as far north as the other side of Fargo. So a lot of flood protection, a lot of work going on to protect everybody. So appreciate everybody's effort at the table.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome very much. We'd like the city of Fargo to appreciate FEMA's role. It helps us very much. 2009, we had a flood and FEMA stepped in. It was a good partner for us. We had a city of 115,000 and we had 130,000 volunteers that came through the area. In fact, one time, he was governor at that time, he brought some gloves and helped us with sandbagging, Governor Hovind at that time. We want to appreciate the spirit of cooperation. You rolled out a new map and we kept telling everybody it was coming and coming, it's coming, and it finally came. And hey, you guys didn't tell it was coming. Okay. So we did want to appreciate our engineering department reviewing and incorporating surveyed properties that reflected more accurately the risk. And we did review and incorporate LOMARs in the new map effectively upon the release of the map that more effectively reflected the risk. We were very pleased working with your departments on the development of successful application to continue our basement exemption. That's extremely important for our community to have the basement exemption, and it works very well. And we're trying to find a path forward to review the complicated CLOMAR associated with the FM diversion, which is another step in our process. Again, your staff has worked very well with us and helped us resolve some code issues. The trouble we have with the CLOMARs non-diversion is it's very complicated and will take a fair amount of coordination to get that done. And it does not always work that one trend of one policy fits all. You know, Fargo is different. We've got clay, we've got flatness, we've got some issues that a lot of other communities don't face. We have a little bit of frustration that the FEMA does have a plan that has $1 billion sitting out there that if you were a disaster area you could qualify for, and we have $158 million worth of work that we could do under that. But when we went to FEMA, they said, well, we've never lost. So I'm kind of flipping a coin trying to figure out which neighborhood I should have given up on 209, but the reality is we would have gotten in trouble either way. But Grand Forks lost and then got a lot of help at that time. It would seem to me with that $1 billion that's sitting there, Senator Hovind's trying to shake some money free for us and Senator Heitkamp and Representative Kramer, but we just need a little money to have us start going on this diversion. So I don't know if that can ever be looked at, but we don't have enough damages, and that's what the thing that to get into. We do have plans. We are shovel ready. We have everything ready for you. We'd qualify in every other area, but the problem is that they say, well, you don't have damages. And I think all the representatives would say that we work really hard not to have any damages, and the community continues to do that. April Walker will go through some of the things we've done since 2009, and we continue to do on a daily basis. The issue we're having right now is that 2,000 structures came into the floodplain with the new mapping. If we go to the next mark higher that we're going to go, we'll have 20,000 homes. And I'll have Clay Dietrich talk a little bit later from the Home Builders Association on how that will affect Fargo. Our real concern is Fargo will become a donut. The donut will be West Fargo, which has a diversion. We'll have all the people building, and Moorhead will have the people building. And we like our neighbors, but we love Fargo more, so we really want them to build in Fargo. So I think that's going to be our challenge as we go forward. So I will have April Walker, our chief engineer, go through our presentation, and I think Clay County as well, or Cass County as well, has a presentation for you.
Well, Well, I'm going to try and keep it brief, and that's always a challenge when you've got complicated issues that you're trying to summarize pretty succinctly, but we'll do our best here. We all know that in this area, flooding is the problem. This is just an example of what it looks like when we're in the throes of a flood fight. This is 2009 in the Fargo Dome, our sandbagging operations. And this is, if you came in through our front door today, 2nd Street is right out there across the parking lot and the river there, and this is what we looked like in 2009, again, protecting against that flood. Here's 2011, and just an example of how the flooding is repetitive. This is actually north of town, and Keith could probably tell you more about it, but near Harwood, where we had some inundation that actually caused us to close the interstate and added 22.8 miles in a detour for those folks who had to find their way around during the period when it was closed. So we all know flooding is the risk, or is the issue, and defining the risk has really been an issue for us. We're a river that has a very short period of history. We've got about 100 years of record, and so you can imagine that each flood event that you add to that 100 years of record causes a major swing in what your 1% chance flood is. We did get a new map. That new map went effective in January. It raised our floodplain just about a foot. The hydrology did not change when we remapped. It was the same hydrology that was used for the previous mapping based on 29,300 cubic feet per second. That hydrology was developed in the 70s and early 80s and was carried forward for this mapping. But with that change, that, again, using the existing hydrology and just remapping, we saw about a foot of change, and it impacted approximately 2,300 structures within the city. So that's not within the diversion footprint, that's not within the county, that's within the city. 27,600 acres of land are also impacted. In 2009, we experienced that flood of record, and that was 40.8. So you can see we've already experienced a flood that exceeds what FEMA has us mapped at as our 100-year flood. Through the development of the diversion project, we updated the hydrology. So we took a look at the period of record, added in those recent years of major flooding, and we're learning through that process that we really should be looking at something closer to 34,700 cubic feet per second as our flow, which equates to a stage of about 41 feet. At 41 feet, when we map that, we've got approximately 19,400 structures impacted. Those are existing structures impacted. That's not new construction, that's not new building. Those are buildings that exist today that would be inundated at that 41-foot elevation. And with that 36,430 acres of impacted land. This is just a reminder for those of you who were here in 2009. We just had our 6-year anniversary of that flood event, and we had about 8 days to put together 52 miles of protection. Now, we actually knew we were going to flood sooner than that, so we started sandbagging operations and those types of activities earlier in February. But the time between when we broke flood stage and we crested was just about 8 days. So 29 miles of earth levee were constructed by the city of Fargo. 5 miles of earth levee was constructed by the county that we actually depended on as our primary line. 8 miles of HESCO were placed. 0.3 miles of a product called Portadam, and someday there's going to be somebody in the audience from Portadam that's not going to like to hear me say this, but I never want to see that product again. And about 10 miles of sandbag. After that event, we started to take a real hard look at, what are we doing and how do we continue to fight these recurring events that are, greater than 30 feet, greater than major flood stage. And so we had been engaged in the development of a project called the Southside Flood Control Project. And I can remember Dorgan came to us and said, where's your plan to protect the city? And we pulled out the Southside Flood Control Project, and he said, no, the whole city, not the south side. And so out of that encouragement from Dorgan grew this FM area diversion project. So this is the plan that protects the whole city of Fargo. It protects Moorhead, and it protects areas of our county that without it, we wouldn't have a plan to protect. It is a federally authorized project. It includes a 1,600-foot wide diversion channel with 150,000 acre-feet of upstream staging. It has been selected. It was selected through that process of a feasibility study, and many alternatives were considered to get to this final design. It provides 100-year protection for the city of Fargo, and it provides, and beyond the city of Fargo, and it provides the ability to flood fight against events that are even greater than that 100-year, which every major metropolitan area should have, greater than 100-year protection.
Am I allowed to ask questions along the way?
Absolutely.
Yes.
When you say up to the 100-year, are you talking about at the 29,000 CFS or at the 35,000?
The core is 41-foot, 34,700 CFS.
So,
We're not building for yesterday's
No.
floodplain. We're building for tomorrow.
so
Absolutely.
what's the, so the floodplain right now is the 39.4?
Correct.
When is the 41.1 operative?
Well, that's a question we get all the time. When will that be the floodplain? And, you know, I think we were already in the process of remapping. That remap process started following the 1997 flood. And so FEMA was so far down the road to producing that map. They had so much invested in that study that they said, it's going to be quicker to get this map out. Let's get it out because it more accurately reflects the risk versus what you have in place today, which was a foot lower. Let's get it out there. Let's start using it. But they understood even at that time that our risk was probably greater and we needed to define it.
And the problem is in preparing for the diversion and the product of that, you have all the hydrology that you wouldn't normally have, and you wouldn't be normally able to study that. So I was talking to Senator Hoeven. I mean, our goal would be to try to get the diversion done. I don't know if we can do that 6, 8, 10 years, and then do the remapping, because otherwise you're going to remap and remap. You're going to have that cost to doing that.
And as a requirement of the diversion, we are, you know, changing the map. And so we do have to submit a conditional letter of map revision, and ultimately we would have to submit a LOMR. So from FEMA's perspective, we're going to do that work for you, hand you the package, and look for you to review it and come back and forth with us and agree on what
So
the future floodplain should be.
Under our normal sequence, Senator, we would go back on a 5-year recurrence is when we're going to, unless you came to us and said the map needed to be changed sooner, we would be back in 5 years to evaluate whether or not it was still valid. Given this information, I won't prejudge what the determination is. I don't want to get there too quickly. And then we would begin a process. Now, the question is, where are you at, given your diversion project and that? In a hypothetical reality, if I'm in a community that we come back 5 years down the road and they're still talking about a project, I'm probably going to change the map then, and I'm going to update it. To the degree they're giving us data on what's already under construction, we tend to want to see some of that stabilize and have the map reflect that.
If we're starting construction like in 2016 and we're just ongoing, let's say it's a 10-year project, what would you do then?
All this becomes a series of hypotheticals, and what I have tended to see, and so it's easier for me to talk with a little bit of distance as opposed to specifically about Fargo, but as I've done these major projects in other parts of the country, they tend to come in phases. And so the CLOMAR, for example, isn't all just one piece. It comes in sections, and we tend to deal with those updates in those successive sections. Without seeing the details of the plan and what those phasing pieces look like, we also have a provision under our regulations by which we have a specific zone for a levee that is partially constructed but not yet completed. So it's at 50% of completion. But those are pieces that as we're going through what may be the most complicated conditional letter of map revision that we've done. So it's different here. Just the size and scope of what you're doing. We would want to collaborate with you, and it's really Ryan's team that has the lead on this in terms of what do those phases look like. Right. The map may be updated in phases, or it may need to be something that is done collectively at the end. We'd have to see the specifics.
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure I understand, so I'm going to ask just another question here. So right now the map is the 39.4 feet. And so, you know, the flood insurance and so forth is predicated on 39.4.
So we have 2,000 houses now that went into floodplain. If we do the second remap, it's 20,000.
But we're saying we anticipate it's going to have to be higher. That's what
Correct.
you're saying. That's the 40.8, is that right?
41.
40.1.
I mean, 41.1, I'm sorry, 41.1. So normally you'd come back and remap, and let's say, you know, that 41.1 wasn't there, you just normally come back and check in 5 years,
So
right?
normally, based on, in some of this, in your other role, given the committee, depending on what kind of resources Congress appropriates into that program, which has varied over the years, that becomes the basis by which every 5 years we will do a validation check, and then based on available funds is how we then proceed across the country.
So in terms of remapping to the 41.1, or whatever it is, how should that work from your guys' perspective? Now, I don't know if we're jumping the gun on your presentation, and maybe you want to bookmark this and come back, but that's where I'm thinking we want him working with us to do this in the best coordinated way possible. In other words, when should they come in? What I'm hearing you saying is, well, normally 5 years. Mayor says, yeah, what if it takes us 10 years to build this thing? You go, well, it could be done in phases. Sounds okay. So is that, I mean, are we saying that's the plan? That's how we should? You want to go all the way through this? But I want to come back and find out how he recommends the mapping go so that it fits with your construction.
I think our real estate market and our home builders market would state to you that it gets confusing, because even we had the 2,000 go on here, that's all of a sudden set up confusion. So now I come into town to buy a home, the first question is going to be, do I need flood insurance? Is this a flood protected area or not? And then if you say, well, we'll do segments of it, that's going to make it a little difficult, because unless the engineering department says this is the next designated spot that FEMA's going to do, you're going to have to pay flood insurance in 5 years because it'll change. So that's where we'd have trouble, Roy, as far as that part of it.
And so what I would suggest, and maybe one of the things that we take as something coming out of this, is as you're moving through your process, the beauty of a CLOMAR, that conditional map revision, is all the work's done, and we're just waiting for that phase to be certified. And so we could do this by which we know there's certain phases that will be certified as complete, and that's when we take the next piece. Oftentimes, communities want to emphasize the areas that are going to remove people from the floodplain, but we have to deal with where the water goes, and the water may dictate the segments that we do on this. And so what we can do collectively is outline, given the conditional map revision process you're going through, we can plan those map changes. I will tell you, for me, what has to be predicated on is when is construction actually beginning? Because if I get to the 5-year mark and we're still talking about the project, then I have to start acting based on those data.
That's not the plan.
So
Right,
as long as
but
that won't
also-
be the case, we'll be in good shape.
In reality, though,
It is
can you?
not the plan that we're going to be talking about. I mean, the plan is to get going. But is it the right approach then if we can, over the next year, plan out the segments and how they're going to go with some realistic timeframes, which we hope to do, then he could come in and say, okay, we would map in line with that plan, and would that then address the concern you raised about people knowing whether or not they're going to have to get flood insurance?
Predictability is very important for us, so predictability, and sometimes when the government comes and says, I'm here to help you, you know, the standard response is, I'm not sure you are, but, you know, that's the issue we have. So predictability means a lot for our market. So if we know there's some predictability, so we can say to them with our engineering department, so April knows what's going on, and if somebody calls in and says, I want to build a house at 50th and 60th, whatever, they have an answer for them.
So ideally, we want to try to map out or in phases or however we do it, but schedule out how this is going to be constructed and what time frame, and then hope that your mapping plan coordinates with it.
And so,
right? That's what we're after?
And I think we're going to need to do a Plan A and a Plan B, and this is just my thoughts as we look forward.
This is the April Roy plan. You got one side of it, Roy's got the other side, and we're going to say, oh, that's the
Right.
April Roy plan, and it works perfect.
Daryl,
So
this
with-
year, how much construction do we have going on this year, diversion and flood projects? 100 million?
Well, we have a budget of 200 million, but that's a lot of land acquisition and all of that, so.
We got work at
The only,
Oxbow. We're
the
doing
only
stuff at Oxbow.
construction actually that's taking place is the levee around Oxbow, Baki Hickson, and then internal levees for Fargo. The footprint of the channel requires, as the Senator and Congressman are aware, We need startup funding, and then once we have that, we're ready to go. And so right now, our target would be, our target is 2016 to start construction, assuming we get startup funds.
Right, I mean, the things we've talked about, DNR coming back, litigation, us getting some amount of federal construction funding, we're hoping to target 16. So then hopefully these phases would be built off that, and then the Roy April mapping plan would tie right into that.
So just jumping back to that, I have a question for you then. So let's say Plan A is the diversion Clomer, and we're assuming that we're going to be able to get the diversion rolling, and we're going to move towards a Clomer that takes everything in the protected area out. And Plan B is, in a 5-year time frame, you come back and things are moving along, but maybe not fast enough for you to wait that time. Let's talk, though, about it's going to take you time, just like it took from 97 till 2005 to put out this map. When you come back and say, we think the risk is different, what is the time period between you making that determination and the delivery of a new map? It's not immediate, just so we're all aware of that, right?
It's complicated, but let me try to break this down. So to the degree that we've done all the work on the conditional map revision, and the community and FEMA absolutely agree with what it's going to do. And as I do this in communities, it's more flood protection and homes coming out of the special flood hazard area. Under that horizon, I have some experience by which we literally preload the pieces. We see it coming. We're planning for it on the FEMA budgetary side so that we make sure we know which year we have to have the contracts in place. And because we know what the post-construction condition looks like, I have experiences by which when the city and FEMA are in harmony, that somewhere between 3 to 9 months after certification of that phase, the map changes in effect. Let me contrast that. When I'm coming in and doing a normal map update, you guys, we haven't been collaborating, and we're going to go through a multiple round process with an extensive appeal process by which we expect a push and pull. Those map updates tend to take 3 to 4 years. And so it really just has to, the law requires a certain amount of due process, specifically a 90-day appeal period that has to be resolved. We have a highly collaborative process with the community in advance of that, and that's what you've been going through for the map that just went into effect. When I've done projects like this, other places, we've aligned the elements so that whether it's the Corps of Engineers or it's the local engineer, whoever the owner of that levee is, when they certify it complete, it's a matter of weeks before we publish the map to start the 90-day appeal period, which we're required to do under the law. And when people are only coming out of the special flood hazard area, I don't usually get an appeal, at which point we can move forward pretty quickly. The difference for the one you just did is when there are people coming into the special flood hazard area, there's a lot more give and take, and I am firmly committed to the due process to make sure that anyone who's being mapped in has every right to come through and make sure they understand this as it goes through. And so to the degree that we see this in phases, we can lay out a timeline. I think as we work through various elements of the combo program that the center has us now working on, and we memorialize this, there do have to be certain kind of time thresholds that if we can't get to this phase by this date, we have to reconsider where we're at. If you guys are starting in 2016 and you're beginning to make progress and we have scheduled mapping updates that proceed after that,
well, we've got some work going on this year. Let me talk about that. So again, this is just the overall diversion project. There are pieces of that diversion project that are integral to other work that the city's doing as well. We have 2 plans. We have our long-term diversion project, and we also have a comp plan, okay? And I'm going to talk a little bit about the comp plan. But the pieces that you see on the screen right now, these are pieces that are, the diversion would be dependent upon, once it's completed, to push 35 feet through town. and they're pieces that we need for our comp plan before we get to that point where the diversion is ready. So starting in 2015, here we go. This is a piece that is one of those that's integral to the diversion. It's integral to the diversion again because when we are flowing 35 feet through town, there will be water on the flood control structure, so it has to continue to be certified and is a part of that project. In 2015, the items that are shown in blue on this map are going to be constructed. The items that are shown in purple, pink, those are 2016. So in blue, we have some demolition of structures that we're getting out of the way for a flood, for the flood wall. We have relocation of a lot of underground utilities, in particular with the First Avenue section there, the piece that goes out, I'm sorry, this isn't going to show on there, that goes out and connects to the bridge. Let me use the mouse, right in here. So this piece here is a lot of underground construction that needs to go into the road to facilitate the construction of the flood wall, which is this red line that you see that runs north-south through there. That's flood wall. So the road actually sits over here. The road's going to get relocated to this side. You might have saw the construction when you came in the front door. There's a lift station being built in the parking lot. Right now, the road's on the east side of that lift station. When we're done, it'll be on the west side of that lift station with a flood wall between the road and the river. So again, in 2015, we're going to relocate those utilities. We're going to rebuild First Avenue, get that up and running and open. 2016, you're going to start to see the flood wall get constructed, and under construction today is the lift station in that area. Similar activity going on south of Main Avenue. This is Main Avenue right through here. Here we have another lift station that's being constructed here. This area, this is the existing 4th Street levee. We're going to be building a emergency closure structure with stop logs that goes across the road, and then a flood wall that parallels the road through here. That's happening this year in 2015. In 2015, we're taking down the very large apartment complex that sits here. We're currently in the process of relocating the residents out of that structure. It'll be removed in the fall, and then next spring, you'll see a levee get constructed next year, next construction season, across that property that then ties into existing flood control in the Main Avenue area.
Are there special flood hazard areas landward of that construction?
Yes. At the current FEMA mapped floodplain, the 39.4, it doesn't go very far, but it does go into that parking lot, comes up to the existing city hall, gets pretty close to the library, but it doesn't go beyond that. So for about that first block, there's flood inundation at the 100-year today, the map 100-year.
And the area going up, similar?
Going up, all the way up to 4th Avenue, yeah. Okay. This is just a rendering of what that project will look like when it's done. You can see there the wall kind of articulates through that area all the way down. This is the First Avenue location where the closure structure would be. Here's that lift station right there that's currently under construction. So just an artistic rendering of what that'll look like when the road's relocated and it's all said and done. The other thing that we did after the '09 flood is the city officials said, we've got to start to tackle the flood risk now. We can't wait for the diversion. So engineering department put together a plan that looks at ground that's at 39.4 or lower, those areas that require major mobilization during a flood, that are low, that have a lot of risk. Let's take a look at those and develop a plan for what you would do to build a permanent project for anything that's 39.4 or lower. So we did that. That was done in 2012. The commission adopted that plan. At that time, we felt like we were going to spend about $247 million total to get that project done. We've been focusing our attention on the area you see in yellow on this map. So here's, for orientation, here's the Red River where the cursor is coming along. That's the Red River. Here's where Rose Coulee is. We have a legal drain system that ties into the river. It's uncontrolled. The river backs up through the legal drain system, all right? So here we are all along the coulee, both the north and south sides. We have to build lines of protection. Out here, we're in the realm of 52nd Avenue South, coming south, and then you're at 64th, which is kind of the end of the city, if you will, on the west side of the interstate, and 76th on the east side of the interstate. So what we need to do is build a continuous line of protection that starts out here on the river and goes all the way along the north side of that drain, all the way down, and ties off to high ground in terms of the 39.4, and then we can certify and remove the yellow area from the floodplain. Similarly, we end up basically building a ring dike around the pink area and a ring dike around the blue area, and when enough of those projects are done, we'll submit loamers to remove those areas from the floodplain.
So that would be, the yellow area would be probably to your comment, is if we certify that area, those would come out, which those people would want to do. That'd be 2,000 structures or more that would want to come out of the floodplain, correct?
The yellow area represents about 1,500 of those 2,300 structures. So we've really been concentrating our efforts on making sure we're building projects to benefit that yellow area.
So that being the case, then when would you do the remapping so that they would come out?
So the question is, when would it be done? And if we knew the target date for its completion, we would go through that conditional map revision process by which you're getting us the updated engineering and the updated in terms of the hydrology and hydraulics. My goal, contingent on having the funds to do so, would be to have that map change go into effect 3 to 9 months after the project is completed.
So it's not like you have to wait 5 years?
No.
I mean, if you have the construction done, you can request they do the flood map update, and then...
And what happens when these conditional map revision is because people are constructing it, you're bringing us the updated science. And so the hard part of the work for us when we're doing new mapping is we have to go and get the engineering data and the hydrology and hydraulics. When these projects play out, the project sponsor brings that to us. And again, as long as we can see it coming and we've got the funding in place so that we can put our contracts in place, I've had a fair amount of success in being able to meet people in that, 6 to 12 months from the time that project is done, the map is in effect in the community.
Right.
We'd be happy to do that. So we'll bring in the data when we're bringing people out of the floodplain, and we'll forget about the rest of the data.
So here's one of the important points as we look at these individual projects, that as you look at a comprehensive plan, which is absolutely the right answer, is we start looking at whether or not when certain phases are done, are we causing rise on other properties?
Right.
Because as we do this in phases, we've got to be very mindful that when we're protecting this 1,500, we're not adversely increasing the flood risk for 150 others. And this becomes the stickiest, hardest part of this. There are ways through it, and we're committed to keep working with you to those ends. But I always want to be really transparent with folks. As we do these pieces, we need to look holistically, because I don't want to cause an additional flood rise on someone because of this project.
But isn't that required as part of your plan anyway?
Yep,
I mean, aren't you
should be.
doing that anyway?
Yes.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, historically, FEMA doesn't look at a project until the CLOMR application is submitted. And we've got a really good relationship with Region 8 right now, because we've just been through the process of developing a plan for how are we going to deal with the CLOMR on the diversion. And that conversation, of course, had to start before the CLOMR landed on somebody's desk. What we're hoping for is that we can continue that cooperative effort, because we don't want to throw this one on somebody's desk without having that coordination in advance as well. So,
And in the commitment you'll have from me, and Ryan and his team who will deliver on this, is as long as we're continuing to collaborate on this, there are not going to be surprises.
Sure.
We're going to see it. You're going to know what's coming to us. We're not surprised. What's coming your way isn't going to surprise you. And we're going to follow through on our commitments. And if there's something that's causing us to slow down, we will telegraph it to you early. And so can we find ways to overcome that and get it to the right answer, which is ultimately you're trying to protect lives and property here, which is the right thing to do.
very good. So just moving on, why are we doing a comp plan when we've got a diversion plan in the works? Well, every mile of levee, every foot of levee we put out there reduces our emergency measures immediately, and we see benefits from that immediately. It provides real protection to existing homes that were built prior to the knowledge of the flood risk that we know today. Upon completion of these certifiable reaches, we can take property out, and I don't like to say remove flood insurance. I like to say make it available at the lowest possible rate. If somebody wants it, they can get it as cheaply as possible. And then combined with the FM diversion project, then we've got a project that provides us greater than 100-year level of protection for a metro area. So that's what the goal is. So just a little update on where we're at. Since 2009, the city has purchased 173 homes. If you go back to 1990, it's actually 300 homes that we've purchased since 1990, but just since 2009, 173 of them. That has been at a cost of about $57 million. In addition to that, the Diversion Authority has begun the process of acquiring 15 properties within Fargo that are necessary because of that integralness of some of these projects. And we also have remaining under the comp plan, separate from the diversion, 121 properties that we need to acquire, which we estimate will be about another $36 million in cost. So we've made a lot of progress along the riverfront and the drain front in that regard. Since 2009, 16 miles of levee has been constructed. So 15 miles of that is earth, 1 mile of flood wall. Remember, 47 miles constructed by the city under an emergency during 2009. Now there's 16 miles less for the next 40.8-foot event that comes along. The construction cost for that 16 miles was about $82 million, but again, that $57 million in acquisitions was also a cost associated with these, so about $137 million to get to where we are at 16 miles. By doing this, we've reduced our sandbank count, 4 million, on a similar event to 2009. We had to get private property easements across approximately 80 properties, but we've been working very cooperatively with landowners, with park districts, and anywhere we can to secure those easements. And right now, we can say we're 45% complete with our comp plan. Today, in progress, we have about 3.5 miles of levee being built. Those projects cost approximately $100 million. That includes $67 million in construction costs and the acquisition. So you can see we picked off the easy ones because we only spent $137 million to get the 16 miles, but this 3.5 miles is costing us $100 million. So they're getting more complicated, they're getting more difficult, and that's going to continue to be the trend as we move forward, including the fact that we have to raise the interstate for approximately a mile to get over the drain as the next part of this. So with what's currently under construction, we'll be at 55% of our comp plan. Remaining projects, we've got, I always joke because they say 13.38, that's engineers. Well, let's call it 13.4 miles of levee left to construct. We did update our estimates based on what we were seeing with the projects that we have been building. There's been an escalation in construction costs in our region. And so here we are. We've spent quite a bit of money, and we're looking ahead, and we're saying to complete that last 13.4 miles, we still got another $240 million to go. And if we get all of those done, we'll be at 92% of the total comp plan. And that'll take care of the bulk of the residential structures that are impacted by the current 39.5-foot, 39.4-foot floodplain. So again, in summary, 16 miles have been built, 45% of the comp plan, but that leaves us with some outstanding issues. Like I said, when we put the plan together, we looked at 39.5 and lower. And so if we were to go to the 41-foot, we've got many more miles to add to that comp plan if we're trying to build our way out of that with levees or another method other than the diversion.
But when you're doing these, are you building these today? Let me give my exact numbers.
41.1.
At 44.1 feet?
No. When we're building them today, what we are able to build to, partially because of geotech, partially because of we would need to buy out additional homes to go any bigger. You'd need to go taller, wider, right? Your footprint changes geotechnically. What we're building to is 44 at the top height. However, that 44 includes 6 inches of topsoil, which we don't count in our flood protection elevation, and it includes somewhere between 6 to 8 inches of long-term settlement that we expect to have in the levees as they've been in place for a while.
So if we went out and did a site survey on it today, it'd probably be at 45.
They're at 44 today. In about 10, 15 years, they might be at 42.5 to 43. So they're certifiable from the 39.5. We need the diversion to keep them certifiable long-term at the 41.
Certifiable at the 100-year level?
At the 100-year level. And so here's, for those watching me kind of aside for a moment. What I don't want to do is set ourselves up so that $250 million into this, we're now coming back and going, well, you were planning for 41.1. The new updated hydrology says 41.5. We require 3 foot of freeboard on top of that, so now we're requiring 44.5, and we're now having very difficult conversations sitting in this room about 6 inches.
Right.
Right.
And so that conversation is not happening today. That conversation is probably happening in 2020. And if the diversion project is done, maybe we don't have this as much.
Yes.
But as you guys are making cost-benefit conversations and they're playing out, and you're looking at this collectively, for whoever's sitting in this room or down the street at the new proposed city hall in 2020, let's make sure that we're designing for the future, knowing where it's going to go, and knowing that we deal with settlement. That's what happens with earthen levies on this. Because the hardest conversations I have in communities are ones who made significant investments. They see the increase in hydrology, plus they've had a little bit of settlement, and we're now having very tough conversations about what is just 6 inches. And so I'll leave it to the engineers to design for what those pieces are.
Right.
But what does it mean to make sure that geotechnically it could withstand some kind of increases? Are we making sure that you could actually plus up that? Sometimes we hit the cap in terms of what you can do. You deal with, as you know better than I, we deal with width as well as height. Let's make sure that we're playing for 15 and 20 years down the road so that these investments have that.
And what we're
that full
planning
lifespan.
for, quite frankly, we know that we cannot build our way out of the 41.1 with levies.
Without the
This community knows that, right? The diversion is the key to having certifiable levies with a diversion that keep us out of the floodplain long-term at 41 feet.
Why, okay, so what you're saying is that with the levee that you're building to and the 3-foot freeboard requirement, you're gonna potentially be short of the 41.1 plus 3 foot without the diversion. Is that right? And you're not able to add on top of the dikes?
In some areas we can. In some areas, we're going to hit constraints geotechnically. The Corps did take a look at us prior to going to the diversion and say, what would it take to build levees through town just to get you to the 100-year? And what they found is we can be certifiably protected to a 50-year event by building levees through town. And that required the purchase of about 700 homes. This plan is about half that, and it gets us to the 39.5.
So it doesn't, you're not able to build the dikes high enough.
Right,
It
you'd
just
have to
doesn't
pull further away
physically
from the
work, is that
river.
it?
Yep.
They have what they call a tie-in, and we can't tie in. There's no place high ground tie-in, so that it would be complete. And so what April's done is we've always said, because that's the old argument, let's just build dikes like Grand Forks, and we don't have to do this diversion. And we're fine at this present level, and you'll certify us, and for a 100-year flood event, we're fine, as long as we don't go back and look again. And if you look the other way for 20 years, that'd be great. But if we had a 500-year event, we wouldn't be able to
And
protect, so.
it's because of the topography. It's not, that's why you can't just build the dike higher.
You'd have to presumably buy a lot more homes.
Right,
Yep.
exactly.
So that
Pull
you can
further away.
widen the levee so you can.
Lift stations, we have 76 lift stations. A number of them are not in the right spot anymore once you have to move that levee alignment. So the investment in infrastructure is exponential when you start to pull further
And
away.
that was the other cost, is although people are a little flabbergasted at the 1.8 billion, it goes up much higher if we have to try to do that type of, and it's mitigation costs and what we'd have to do. And that's where the Corps said, no, that's not the answer. April, are you
Okay.
about done?
Just about done. Just a couple of slides left. You talked about what are we doing with the new developments to make sure that we're building appropriately going forward. I just want to make sure everybody understands that the comp plan was designed not to benefit new development, but to provide benefit to those existing structures that built without knowing what the risk was at the time. They benefit the greatest from the comp plan. When we do have new developments come in, we do require them to build to loamer to the 39.5, to flood proof to the 41 plus 1.2 feet of freeboard. That's what we're using as our standard in terms of building elevation, looking forward, trying to be prepared for a future floodplain change into the future. There's a few slides at the back. I won't go through them in detail. They talk through some of the other things we've done, a setback ordinance, the fact that we're meeting state and federal minimums on those flood proofing, and the work that we did with FEMA and the Home Builders Association to make sure that that basement exemption could continue. You've got references to the City of Fargo website if you're interested in more information. And then, of course, at the back, it wouldn't be a complete Fargo flood package if we didn't give you a bunch of scary flood photos. So those are at the back for you to look at.
And the one where you have everybody doing sandbagging, I think we have some of you guys in there helping us out. Yeah, yeah. You're in the background somewhere, Representative Kramer,
That's good.
Senator Hovind.
Well,
I think Heidi wasn't around quite then, but she came over anyway.
let's start right with questions you have, but then I want to give, Mayor, I'd like to at least go around the table and make sure that anything that somebody wants to bring up, I mean, Roy's getting at the main thing that I wanted to make sure I understood and hopefully works for all of you, and that is that they're doing the mapping in conjunction with your permanent flood protection construction. Sounds like that's what you got planned, and that's what we want, and we're going to continue to work with you going forward to do exactly that. But I just want to make sure, you know, Mayor, if there's anything else that
Keith,
people want to bring
you
up.
guys want to do yours, or do you want to comment on County's presentation? Chad, is you going to have?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, thank you, everyone, for coming. We know everyone at the table is extremely busy, but this important project needs to go forth. And part of that is critical in terms of the FEMA buy-in. A lot of the angst we have locally is the what-ifs. What if FEMA does this? What if this happens next? So the sooner we get you to the table and buying in and participating, you use the phrase, no surprises, the sooner we can get that resolved, the sooner the public at large will be more satisfied in terms of where we're going in a direction. And we're doing this for the folks that are actually sitting behind us, more than us. And you mentioned, Mayor, that you have some photos or some memories of Governor Hovind sandbagging. And my daughter's a 5-year-old. We typically use our 8th graders and up through college to sandbag because the population at large isn't big enough to do the work it takes to get ourselves protected. I don't want to see the senator, Ms. Heidkamp, or representatives or a congressman coming back and throwing sandbags ever again. That's what this ditch does. It gets everyone safe. It gets everyone some surety as to where they're going to be in the future. And our realtors will probably speak to that in a moment, that what will happen if this doesn't happen, or what will happen over the coming years if things don't progress as required. And the last thing I want to touch on real quick that no one has talked about is there's a report done in 2009 by the Diversion Authority. Former Commissioner Scott Wagner brought it forth, and with our EDC worked out a formula and a presentation. I'm going to bring it, should Mr. Vanu let me present it at the May diversion meeting. This isn't a Fargo diversion. This is an economic region diversion. And what this report showed back in 2009 and will show, we're a $15 billion economy right now. We're finalizing those numbers. That's gone up since 2000.
From 10 billion.
Yep, and it also shows how many people come here from around the region. And one thing no one understands is, not no one, but few people don't understand is just how many people come here from outside the region. These people live counties away. There's one county to our south where preliminary data shows 1/3 of their working population comes to Cass to work. 1 in 3 people come here to work 5 days a week. If we go away, 1/3 of their income is gone. And it may not be instant, it may not be 100%, but you ask our friends in Grand Forks, there's a goodly portion of them that will be unemployed. And the folks like Microsoft, the folks like Case, the big manufacturers, probably aren't going to wait for the city to recover. What they're going to do is they're going to put their mechanisms, their machines, their intellect, their computers on a rail, in a car, force it to Seattle, force it to Detroit, and that's where it's going to stay. As I was testifying in the legislature last session, 2 sessions, yes, last session, and just learned from the Grand Forks City Superintendent, their elementary school enrollment is now back to what it was pre-flood. It's 20 years of recovery to get back to where they were. I don't know if that city will ever recover. It probably will, but we don't know. We can't take that kind of hit here as a state. The amount of money we provide in terms of income tax, and I'll show that in that report, and the Senator's representative, I'll get you the copies of that, so you can then quantify more specifically as to how much money, just in sales tax alone, is given and contributed to the state's economy at large. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for your support, and Sir, anything you can do to help us out, I would be grateful for it.
Chad, now, do we have the same, so April, when you were talking about the plan, does that include the county too? So that it's the whole region, when we talk phases, we got everybody covered here.
The city of Fargo has our comp plan, which is non-diversion, is specific to the city. But it does tie into, and
So
we
we
work
are-
cooperatively. with the
We got
county.
the same thing going, we got the,
We do, Senator, and thank you.
got the Keith Roy plan going?
We work very closely with the city, and we've had that very outstanding relationship. I've had a presentation, I'm not going to go through it all. I'll just kind of, hit a couple of highlights and say that, we appreciate FEMA's help over the years, and we in the county, in addition to those acquisitions that April mentioned, those 300 within the city, we've done, I counted up since 1997, we have had 222 home acquisitions outside of the city in the rural areas that have really helped with the county's flood mitigation efforts. One of the things, the picture up there now, there's one of those neighborhoods that we completely have acquired, and one of the things is we had a lot of flood-prone areas just outside of the city, and those have meshed very well with the city's comprehensive plan, because now as the city is growing south, but they're growing farther away from the river, we've done some tremendous things with green space in these neighborhoods along the river that we've acquired. We're working with the Fargo Park District on some things where we're creating nature parks in these green spaces, and it's land that's less than a mile away from where the major developments in the city are, so they're very accessible to the city, but yet we can respect those deed restrictions, follow the FEMA rules on what we do with those properties, because we are really making them low impact green space type parks, but yet they've become a real nice asset for the community. One other thing I'll just mention, since we're talking a little bit about FEMA, HMG, we just had a success story that we just finished last fall. This is a neighborhood, about 30 families lived in this one particular community, and they still do, and they had, their homes are built high enough so they didn't flood, but in 2009, 2010, and 2011, those families spent about a month boating in and out to their homes because the access roads all flooded. We've been working hard, and finally we did get some HMPG, some hazard mitigation grant dollars, and happy to, jumped over the slide I wanted, happy to show that the picture on the left is what their access road looked like during previous floods. The one on the right is the new bridge that was installed last fall with about a 15-foot road raise and new bridge construction so that in future floods those folks will have access. So I'm not going to duplicate some of the things April said, but I'll just say we're working very cooperatively with the city on, and the county's biggest flood mitigation effort is by far the diversion project. So thank you.
Any questions on the county side where you feel like we're?
No, I think in a very similar way, it's just how we keep those acquisitions and those, that kind of bridge project by which we look at those kind of elements and that kind of value that does. We talked about economic vitality. One of the things that I focus on is the fact that when communities are impacted by the disaster, they rarely make it past 70% of their pre-disaster economy. Mm-hmm. 5 years after the event, there's usually a construction boom that will happen immediately thereafter, and most of them don't make it past 70%. And so the ways that we begin to look at these elements in such a way so that we look at these broader mitigation projects, which take years, sometimes a decade or more, but along the way making sure we have the right elements so that if hopefully they withstand the event, and to the degree they can't withstand it, we look at other elements, whether it's insurance or other means by which we know they can rebound quickly. Because when the companies leave, they don't usually come back. And so what we're doing to make sure that that economic vitality by which the nature and character of that community can be sustained, because that's why people choose to live here. And that, when I talk about resilience, that economic vitality is the measure when it comes after the event, how we collectively, yes, we can all show up and respond and do work the sandbags, and you guys are probably better than anywhere else in the country to do that, but at the end of the day, you're better off when you're not wholly reliant on that in terms of your economic future.
Right on.
I think we have Clay as the last speaker now. Hey, Dietrich, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank Senator Hovind and Congressman Kramer for setting this up, and the mayor for inviting us. I've got a kind of a unique view of this, being I ran 2 careers for most of my life. I was a assistant fire chief in the local community here for 27 years, and I've also been in building for about 40 years now. And during the 2009 flood, I was the operations chief for the city of Moorhead, and we built many miles of dike and did that. Had the opportunity to put in 188 hours of work in 8 days, and so the efforts that we talk about to make this happen are tremendous, and most folks are working on 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night to try and save the community, and everybody did a tremendous job. But it's not something you can go to that well every year. You know, people just wear out, and those kind of volunteer efforts aren't going to happen continuously. So I think what's happening in our community is fantastic. And what we've been doing with the home builders is really tracking all the things that go on. And we do permit reports monthly now. We do a press release quarterly, and I have our 2014 news release to get to the senator and congressman and to our folks from FEMA to show what's happening. And what we found is that the Fargo community actually had a reduction of 1 permit in 2014, where every other community in our metro, Dilworth, Moorhead, West Fargo, had a sharp increase in housing. And what we feel that is that the uncertainty of what's going to happen with flood insurance and the uncertainty of what's going to happen in the city of Fargo is driving the buyers to move to other markets. And what that really talks about is the vitality of Fargo. And Fargo is the hub of this regional economic engine that's here. And if I don't have that report with me, but there was a tax report that came out from the state of North Dakota, and it showed that in 2014, Fargo's sales tax generated more revenue for North Dakota than the oil boom. And that was in probably their best year. So when you look at...
And in addition to that, we have 10 people a day coming into town, moving into town, so they got to have a place to live and build a home and do those things. So we're continuing to grow.
And that's been continuous. I was born and raised in this city. I've been here for 55 years. And when I grew up, our 25th Street ended at 9th Avenue, turned to gravel, and West Acres was 5 miles from town. So, I mean, that's how much this community is growing. And it's vital to the whole state. I don't think a lot of people do the math on that. We do at Home Builders because it's important to know how the market works. And without Fargo, North Dakota is in big trouble, not just the region, because it is the engine that's driven this state for as long as I can remember, and that's getting to be a while now. So when I look at that, in working with the city, we worked with them to get the basement exception, continued on the basements to keep that going. We are building all the new structures to that 42.2, and then we've asked the questions of, why are we that high? And they've explained, as they did today to everybody, that we're planning for the future. And so us as a building community, we understand that. We're working as partners with them to try to achieve this goal. There's no backlash from us whatsoever. We want to make sure that the homes that we build and the apartments and commercial properties are viable, forever. And so, any way that we can get this accomplished quicker and get the stability and a clear plan so that can be out to the public, that's super important for the community at large. And as the mayor had mentioned earlier, Fargo is in the middle of that donut. On the Minnesota side, they're a little bit higher. They've actually started their recertification on their flood. I think they'll have most of their side actually completely certified by the end of 2016. West Fargo has their diversion. And so Fargo is really the last piece to finish this community, but it's also the most important piece because of the economic engine that Fargo is. So, thank you.
Yeah, the Metro's, well, you just had it in the paper, about 214,000 is the immediate Metro. Yeah, and it's growing. I mean, very dynamic economy, and really draws, a lot of people like you're saying, from both sides, from North Dakota and Minnesota, you know, real center of commerce, no doubt. Okay, guys, who else has something that you'd like to make sure we bring up before we disband here? Anything else? Greg, from the state's perspective, anything that in particular you want to make sure that we're...
Well, just a couple of comments, Senator. Thank you. We still have ongoing, at some level of open or in phase, about $14 million yet in hazardous mitigation grant program projects in the area, and you know, we'll continue to work that. The state is committed to make a priority in terms of acquisitions in future hazardous mitigation grant dollars that become available. So it's all part of the solution set. We struggle with, you know, the rules that come along with that at times, and you know, hopefully we can find some way around that into the future here as we work together collaboratively in this project. That's all I would have, Senator. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Obviously, state key part of all the hazard mitigation work we do in the HMGP funds and so forth. Daryl, from the Diversion Authority, any other thoughts in terms of this coordination and planning that we got to be on top of?
Thank you, Senator. I want to make a comment, Mr. Wright. Your line of questioning to me when April was up there tells me that you get it and you understand the fact that the diversion is a vital part of this 100-year protection. And Senator Hoeven reinforced that by, I think, some of his questioning as well. We are, and I think the mayor indicated, we are not Grand Forks. We cannot do it alone with internal levies, and you heard that through your questioning. It has to be a combination of internal, you know, the levies that they're doing, plus the diversion to get us to where we want to be for permanent flood protection. So I'm really glad to hear the questions that both of you asked, because it tells me you understand why it's so important that both of them proceed and why it's so important to have the dollars so that we can get this accomplished.
And along that line, let me ask one more question. So without it, without the diversion, we can't get to the 100-year. But then when the diversion is added into all this other work that's going on, then we're at how many year what level of protection?
Certified 100-year protection, but you have ability on top of that with the construction and everything to do temporary measures to go beyond for, you know, higher levels of flooding. Things that we've been doing, quite frankly, for forever. The temporary measures of, you know, temporary clay levees or sandbagging and that type of thing. The other thing is with the diversion, you go beyond what Fargo is doing for trying to get some of the homes out of the floodplain, but you now add the diversion goes around Horace and West Fargo and Harwood and all of that, so it adds protection for all of those. And it has to go around those because of the geography of Fargo and those adjoining cities. So it's just...
And projections are we'll continue to go to 250, 260,000 people, so they're behind that footprint and protected. So from a risk standpoint, we're taking more people that are less risk than.
Mayor, anything you want in wrap up?
Thank you very much for having us. We wanted to talk to you. We have good reception when we go out to Washington, and my staff's been working with your staff very well. We'll continue to cooperate with you, and we're glad you could come here today because we want to see some interest in this and efforts into this area. And I'm also glad to hear that our congressional delegation is going to put shovels in the ground in 216. Thank you.
Sure hope so. Sure hope so. If we can bring everything together both here and in D.C., that's the plan. So, Kevin?
Well, I think that the stage is set for that. I mean, nothing's easy in Washington, but I don't know how it could be set up much better than it has been. And frankly, a year ago, I wasn't so sure it would look as good as it does today. And that's
well, we've got three things we mentioned that got to come together here, but you know, between the DNR and the litigation and then the funding, we need to bring those three together, and if we can, then 16 is doable. But that's what we're working on. But obviously, your piece. I appreciate you being here and the way you kind of jumped right in there with April and with Keith, because we need that coordination to make the HMGP work, to make the flood map work, and to make sure that flood insurance is as affordable as possible, and that For those that want to buy it, they always can, but that more people don't need it than the minimum possible. So for the whole region, So, anything else, guys, before? Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
I did bring maps that are in there, if anybody